Alright guys, so I'm Jared Wooliver, this is Steve Long, we're from Smart Group Training. A lot of you guys already know who we are. We've been to your gym a couple times before, so you probably recognize our faces. What we're here to do today is just talk about the FMS and exactly kind of the system we created. So the FMS is a bedrock within both of our training businesses. It's what we use to find out what level somebody should be at. We need to make sure, we're going to get way more in depth with this as we go on, but we want to make sure we're setting a baseline to find out where people are at. So, needless to say, it's just Smart Group Training. Jared, Steve. Steve, why don't you go ahead and start talking about the FMS a little bit, some of the intricacies of the screen, what we look for, and then we'll just kind of talk about the scoring and actually get into some hands-on stuff today so we can actually show you guys how to screen and clear up any of the questions that you guys have. A couple of you guys have already picked up your certifications, so we just want to make sure that you're pretty clear moving forward. That way you have set standards to always fall back on and apply corrective strategies from there. So Steve, go ahead, just talk about the FMS, give them a little background.
Sounds good. So who in the room is FMS certified again? Cool. Who is anybody completely never heard of it or seen it before in their life? So everybody's at least slightly familiar with it. Cool. So what I want to do first is just kind of talk about what the screen is and what the screen isn't, because there's a lot of misconceptions about like what you're looking for in the screen and what you're actually doing with the screen. Why use the screen? Why not just check out a first workout and see if it's sloppy or not and go from there? So we want to kind of just talk about what the screen is. So first thing we want to talk about is that it's a baseline movement screen to check for major red flags. So the first mission of the screen is just to find out, is there something major wrong or jacked up with this client right now that we need to know about? So before it begins to become a deep assessment, before you start to think about corrective exercise strategy and all that, the first order of business is, can they do this movement, to see if it's horrible or if it's okay and we can start to train it. It also allows you to find out if the client's in pain in any movement. And it's a situation where in that screening situation, you're taking them through the movements, you're taking them through the pain test. So now maybe in a squat that you do in the gym, they might not feel any pain, but when you take them through the full overhead deep squat in those positions, now we're starting to kind of expose those kinds of things. So we know they're at a higher risk for pain, so those are certain things that we don't want to train if we know that there's pain with that movement. So we're looking to see if there's any pain with certain movements and on the specific pain tests that are in the screen. It allows you to find if there's any just small minor movement compensations. So first we're looking for pain, and then we're looking for compensations. So for example, on the squat, we're looking at a bunch of different things. But for example, if when you're lowering yourself down to the squat, you tip forward really far and it kind of looks like an RDL, we know that there's a movement compensation in that squat. They tried as hard as they could to do what we told them to do, but they just can't do it. So there's a movement compensation. We've identified that now by taking them through the movements. So we've identified any major red flags, pain, or just any small movement compensations, and that's where we start to bring in corrective exercise for those compensations. So it allows you to find which movement patterns should be corrected. So now we know which ones we don't even mess with because they're in pain, and now we know which ones have some compensation issues that we can give corrective exercise strategy in that situation and then correct that. And then now it can become a pattern that they can train with strength conditioning exercises. So it allows us to find where we start on the continuum of corrective exercise all the way to strength and power, where they fall. So that's another important thing. It allows you to find which exercises should be red lighted. So that's just which exercises you don't even touch right now. I kind of touched that earlier. Obviously, if it's in pain, that's something that we're not going to train. If there is a major gross movement compensation there or dysfunction, we're also not going to train those patterns. So whenever we look through the 7 different movements, the ones that have a appropriate level of good movement, we're going to train them. The ones that are we're going to correct them, and then the ones that are in pain, we're going to refer out. So it allows us to show what our corrective strategy should be. there's a hierarchy with the FMS, which is one of the best parts. That allows you to know which pattern to start correcting first. That's one of the major, major benefits, because say that on the 7 movements, 6 of them, there's a major movement compensation. Well, where do you begin? Well, you could start working on all 6, right? And technically, we kind of do work on all 6, but there's always one that we really, really focus on, which we know that if we focus on that one, we could potentially clear all of them just by working on that weakest link. What's more important is we know that if we don't clear the lower level stuff, we could be working on that higher level stuff forever, and we're never going to correct the pattern. So a good example of that one is if they have, and just throwing out score, if they have, it's a 1, 2, 3 scoring system, which Jared's going to touch on a little bit later. But if they have a 1, which is a major gross movement pattern issue on their squat, and they have a 1 on their active straight leg raise, we could throw squat corrections at them all day long. There's a really good chance that you're never going to correct that squat until you clear that active straight leg raise. So it follows a developmental a pattern there from supine to quadruped or crawling to half kneeling to standing, and then through those 7 screens. And we make sure we bring them up through those developmental stages within the hierarchy, within the exercise progressions. So you know where to start and what pattern to follow as far as clearing the compensations in the patterns. We're going to provide you guys with a hierarchy list. We're going to provide you with a red light list. We're going to provide you with a corrective exercise poster and all the things that you need to get started. So really this makes it extremely easy for you guys to learn the FMS. So all the done-for-you stuff is going to make your job a lot easier. So once you know how to screen, you know exactly what to do. So that's kind of one of our missions today, to make sure that you know this screen well, and then it's just very easy to be able to take those results and write a program. So from there, we're just going to learn how to screen using all those tools we provided to you, and go for it. So first of all, you can just go ahead and talk about the scoring system. Okay. And I'll go ahead and just start handing these guys out their stuff.
All right. While Steve goes by, start handing out the stuff, I'm just going to go over the scoring system. I know Steve elaborated on it. Basically, it's a 0 through 3, not a 1 through 3. 0 is going to be pain. Everybody in this room, when we see zeros, we refer out. So we don't mess with pain. That's not our ball game. As strength coaches, that's where we need a clinician on our side to make sure that we have, we're not crossing our boundaries, and then we just have communication with the clinician to make sure that we know what's restricted, see if there's any contraindications that they see on the clinical side that we need to be aware of, basically so we can take them from being in pain, get them out of pain, to training at a level that we want them to do. So the scoring system, 0, 1, 2, 3. 0, pain. As soon as we see pain, that's where we should stop the screen. So if we see pain, we already know there's something going on that they shouldn't necessarily be with us. So that's where we want to make sure that you have that developed, that relationship developed with like an SFMA or somebody that's going to kind of speak the same lingo. That's why both of us at our gyms, we have an SFMA practitioner in our facilities. So we're pretty lucky to have that. That way we can just stay in the same facility, talk to our clinician and say what's going on with this client, what restrictions, and let's figure a way to fix them. Getting out of the zeros we refer out. 1, that's a gross movement compensation. So there's going to be a lot of pattern, basically a lot of dysfunction going on in there. So most of you guys are familiar with the screen. Like the squat, there's a lot of different things that can go on. The cool thing with the FMS is there's specific criteria that has to be met in order to be scored a specific number. So it takes out the guesswork of being like, is that a 1, is that a 2? It's like, does that client follow, this with each movement? If they get this, 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 then they're this. So it's an if this, then this. So it's a beautiful system to take out the guesswork. That's one thing that going through like an FMS certification and everything, you'll see a lot of people sit there and have discussions of being like, well, it could go this way, it can go this way. You have, everything laid out for you. Steve's going by to give you everything you pull out of free resources off of movementbook.com. It gives you everything from verbal explanations to what you're looking for and how to properly score. We need to make sure that that scoring system is scored properly every single time. Otherwise, if, you know, Rod, you score different than Matt, that's going to throw off the whole system. We need to make sure that that is a set standard. That way it doesn't matter who screens, we all get the same results. So I'm able to take one of those screens, look at where they fall 0 through 3, and figure out my next action plan just kind of as a case study. So I may not even have seen that individual going through, looking at a medical history, looking at a movement screen. I can see previous injuries, which that's something we want to be aware of, because that's going to be how people get hurt the most, is from a previous injury. So I get that all from my medical history. I'm looking at that, then I got my movement screen scoring 0, 1, 2, 3, and that just takes us through FMS, how we score. So let's go ahead and actually go over the scoring sheet. So everybody has a scoring sheet, correct? As you can see, we've got all 7 movement patterns on that scoring sheet. There should be a raw and a total. So the raw score is where we're going to actually put down what we first see. So as we're going through the deep squat, if you know whatever we determine that number to be, that scoring number, that's going to go into our raw score. With the deep squat, being that it's bilateral, that raw score is going to carry over into the total. But whenever we get into things that are right versus left, that's where the scoring can come into play. So let's just say I got like a 3 right, 2 left. I would put that in the raw score. And then as the coach, I'm going to go ahead and score that, the lowest number there. So I'm going to score that. If it's a 3-2, the total score is going to be a 2. So we got most of the screens are right versus left. However, you do have the squat and then the push-up. Those are going to just be bilateral right there, to where whatever the raw score is, that total is going to be, unless you come into the pain clearance test. So that's another thing that's on there. Basically, there's 7 movements. There's 3 pain clearance tests. So the pain clearance test, we have our shoulder to make sure shoulder impingement. We have a back extension to where we're laying prone on the ground, pressing up, seeing if there's any pain, hips, back, anywhere. And then we also have back flexion, to where I would sit basically in child's pose, getting a nice flexion of the hip and spine and seeing if there's any pain with that. So that's kind of how we go through the scoring, 0 through 3, unilateral versus bilateral, raw score, total. Does anybody have questions on like the scoring sheet that you guys are looking at? It's pretty basic.
And just to reiterate and clarify once again, 0 is pain. 1, there's something major there. You know, that means that basically we're going to try to fix a movement compensation with a corrective exercise. 2 means it's, you know, and we use 1, 2, 3 kind of on like a red light, yellow light, green light system there. So if it's a 1, it's red, you correct it. 2, it's yellow, you train it. You might have a low-level corrective strategy. And then 3, rip it. That just means that it's green. You can train that pattern with strength and conditioning exercises. So that's kind of how that transfers over. But 1, like I said, the movement pattern's bad. 2, the movement pattern hits a certain standard that says that's okay. And then 3 means it's absolutely perfect. So if you're scoring on the sheet and you see a 3 when we go over these, and we're going to go specifically into the 1, 2, 3s on each one next. But we just wanted to get across to you that like 1, bad, 2, okay, 3, awesome. And 0 is pain. So any questions about that? Cool. If there's questions about scoring, we're just going to go into demoing a screen.
So Steve's let's go ahead and have you take me through a screen. And you'll just demo all the way from deep squat down to rotary stability.
And here's where I'm going to have you guys, we got 2 of these, so I'm going to have 1 for each side, and you can just kind of look over them.
This is that resource off of movementbook.com I kind of told you about, to where you can just print these off. Everybody has access to these.
So as I go through, I'm going to have you guys actually read out the scoring criteria back to me, and we're all guys going to kind of talk about Jared's screen. And then what we're going to do is break into 2 groups, and then you guys are going to screen each other. So, you know, you'll be one group, you'll be one group, and you all just kind of go in order. So,
Can I warm up real quick?
No, you can't warm up real quick.
You'll get people that ask that too. You want the screen to be cold, so I just kind of threw that out there. You'll get people coming in for a screen, next thing you know they're on a foam roller opening stuff up. That's not how they move day to day. We want to make sure we catch them how they are moving. You know, it's before I pick up a bag of groceries, I'm not going to sit there and do a warm up and pull out a foam roller. I want to make sure they have posterior weight shift in their cold state to make sure we're keeping them injury free all day. So.
Okay. Now I'm going to go, like I said, straight out of movement book on these directions. So, and straight out of the FMS certification, so you guys get the exact things that you should say to your people. And eventually you have this memorized. It gets really easy. So, but I want to go over the exact stuff so you guys are equipped. So the first thing we're going to do is the deep squat. So first instruction, stand tall with your feet approximately shoulder width apart and toes pointed forward. And we get them kind of lined up on the kit just to make sure that their feet are in a good solid position. From there, grasp the dowel in both hands, place it horizontally on the top of the head so that your elbows are at 90 degrees. So it's important for standardization to make sure that we always have that 90-degree mark right here. So some people aren't all the way at the end of the stick, some people are right next to their heads. We just want to make sure we keep it standardized with 90-degree elbows. And that's one of the major things about the FMS screen is standardization, standardization, standardization. So we want to make sure everyone's doing the same exact stuff every time so we get accurate scores with each person. So from there, you're going to press the dowel directly overhead, while maintaining an upright torso and keeping your heels and dowel in position, descend as deep as possible. So basically, squat down as low as you can, count to 1, and come up to the starting position. Beautiful. And then basically, do you understand the instructions? You would ask the client if they understand that and have them go through the rep, or you can take them through it. I prefer to show them a rep and then have them do it. Sometimes I'll talk it through them. It just kind of depends. If they're not getting it verbally, you're going to have to show them one. So it's good to do your corrective exercise and make sure you can go through the screens and try to nail 3s as best you can. But so, okay, we got scoring sheets right. Who's got scoring criteria? So for him to get a 3, what does he need? And I'll repeat it back if we need to. What's one thing that he needs to have to score a 3?
Upper torso is parallel with tibia or toward vertical.
Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's go profile and go ahead and come down. So upper torso parallel with the tibia. So we're looking for straight line here, boom. So let's see what that would look like if your upper torso was not in line, if you bent forward. And that's typically what we'll see there. What's next?
Femur below horizontal.
Feet are below horizontal. Femur below horizontal. So that's breaking parallel. We just want to make sure that his butt goes below his knees. Good. What's next?
Knees aligned over feet.
Knees aligned over feet. So this is where we're looking for valgus. So we just put him in the foot shoulder width position. When he gets down to the bottom, we don't want any of that. What we got next? Dowel aligned over feet. So go profile. Same thing. This is with leaning forward. So a lot of people say, where is the difference between a 2 and a 3 on that leaning forward? If this stick is in front of his toes, 2. If it's behind the toes, 3. Anything else we're looking for?
That's it.
Good. So that's what we're looking for right there. If he meets those criteria, and you don't overanalyze those criteria, if he meets those criteria, he's a 3. And at this point, if he doesn't meet any of those criteria, he's not a 3. He's not a 2 or a 1. We just know he's not a 3 at this point. So say that he leaned forward. He had a beautiful squat. That was definitely, he nailed a 3. So if he didn't, he bent forward, he had valgus, he had any of those things, then we're going to go ahead and put his heels up on the board. So heels up, toes down, same thing, 90 degrees, push the stick up overhead.
Reposition them every time too, because a lot of the times you'll get when you reposition, that hand position changes. So try to keep everything as standard, reposition before we hit this.
Same thing, push up overhead, go low, count of 1, come on up. And all you're doing now, same stuff, same criteria, except the heels are on the board. So if he now hits those criteria that were for the 3, he's a 2. If he doesn't meet any of those criteria or one of those criteria, then he's a 1, right? So perfect, 3. Perfect, heels up, 2. Not perfect, with heels up, 1. If it hurt, 0. So any questions about scoring and performing the deep squat? Cool. Pretty simple. All right, next we're going to go into the hurdle step. So the first thing we're going to do is take a measurement for the tibia height. So we're going to find the tibial tuberosity, which is like a little bump right underneath the knee, top of the tibia. Usually pretty easy to find, if not right underneath the kneecap. And then we just take a quick measurement, 16.5. Another way people can like to do it is to just have your client step up and just bring the string down to their tibial tuberosity. I find it just a little bit more accurate if you actually measure with the stick. So now that we measured that, we're going to use that same measurement for the hurdle step and his inline lunge. Cheating. All right, so hurdle step. Stand tall with your feet together and toes touching the test kit. So we want to make sure we're here, toes touching. Everyone starts like this because they're going to get a more stable step like this than they are like this. So feet are touching the board and feet are touching together. You're going to go ahead and put the dowel on your neck or on the top of your back and just grasp it anywhere on the stick. While maintaining an upright posture, raise the right leg, step over the hurdle. He's going to tap the heel and then bring it back to the starting position. We're going to check that 3 times, and then we'll move on to the other leg. One thing you see a lot, you want people looking straight forward the entire time and not looking down at their feet. If they need to look down, get a quick check to see where they're at, and then they begin, that's fine, but you don't want looking down the entire time. Stepping on my pants just made me remember something else that's a good thing. Whenever possible, when you have people screen, have them wearing tight-fitting clothing, tucked in, things like that, so you can see the body angles better. So, which also brings me to, I know a question that we're going to hear later is footwear. And Greg Cook says screen them in what they're going to train in. So if they're going to train barefoot, screen them barefoot. If they're going to train in Nike Shox, screen them in Nike Shox. But if they're going to train in Nike Shox, don't screen them barefoot, because that's going to be a whole different ball game there. So just train them in screen them in what they're going to train in. All right, so back to the hurdle. Scoring criteria. What's the first thing? We're looking to see if he's a 3. So what are we looking for?
Hips, knees, and ankles remain aligned in the sagittal plane.
Okay. Hip, knees, and ankles aligned in the sagittal plane. So that means as his leg travels over, we don't get any of those compensations. So that should stay perfectly straight the entire time. No foot turning or turning from the hip. It's rare that you see 3s on the hurdle step, actually. I don't want to like preload you with what you're going to see and what you're not going to see, but you see a lot of 2s on this one, and not a whole lot of 3s and not a whole lot of 1s. That's pretty stellar right there, to be honest with you. What else are we looking for?
Minimal to no movement is noted in lumbar spine.
Minimal to no movement noted in lumbar spine. So, as with everything, we want to keep the lumbar spine neutral and stable. So as he steps over that hurdle, we don't want to see any type of movement through there. Keep it tight. What else we got?
Dowel and hurdle remain parallel.
So you just don't get any
Tilting. Yeah. So tilting side to side. So when as they're clearing, this should stay parallel with the floor. What's next? That's it. All right. So basically, if they hit all those criteria, once again, there are 3. If they didn't hit one of those criteria, they are not a 3.
One other thing, like I know he talked about baggy clothes, being able to see this one. A lot of the times if they're wearing a baggier shirt, I like to tuck it in so I can see the hips. Because a lot of the times, especially if they're pretty solid, they may just get just a little bit of hip, but if they're wearing a bigger shirt, I don't see that. If I tuck that shirt in, I'm able to see that a lot better. So this one, sometimes I just have people tuck shirt in so I can get a better view of what's going on.
And basically, to get a 1, you have a major loss of balance, or you kick the kid over. Or you go around, you did not make a field goal, you missed the field goal. And you would be surprised how many times you'll see someone go, no. So, yeah, so basically a 1 is you kick the kid over, you fall over. If it falls anywhere in between kicking the kid over and falling over, it's a 2. If it's perfect, it's a 3.
And there's a lot of like this. Still a 2. So a lot of times, even though that's a 2, and that's a 2, there's that difference. Just understand the scoring criteria. A 1's a 1, a 2's a 2, a 3's a 3. Stop it there. Don't overanalyze it anything further beyond that.
So if you see them like really kick their hip out to the side, and it looks like they just like barely caught themselves, we're not counting that as a 1.
If I maintained, well, see, I maintained balance. So now if I kind of lost that, that would be losing balance through that. But even though I was twisting, turning, flexing, losing everything, that foot stayed stable. I cleared without kicking the board over, and I got back.
Yeah, if you didn't have to put your foot down midway or step out of it, so this would be loss of balance. Like you had to put your foot down again and then re-lift it up, or you went and stepped out of it, that's loss of balance.
And then another thing, a lot of the times, almost everybody does this. We're looking for this. That way, I'm still a little more loaded on this back leg rather than putting that weight on the front and then pushing off that leg to step back. So it's just touching that heel.
You answered the question that I was going to ask.
You get 3 attempts on every screen, which is another thing that's why I like these questions as we go. Every movement, you're going to look at 3 of them. If they nail a 3 on the first one, you don't have to look at 2 more. But if it could potentially go 1, 2, 3. That's extremely rare. But sometimes you'll see 2, 2, 3, or 1, 1, 2, and you take the best of the 3 attempts. So if I'm on here and I got that one, and then the next one, I'm a 2. If they touch it 3 times, that's a 1. If they touch it 1 time out of 3, then it could be a 2. So yeah, and if when they set their leg down, their leg touches here, that's not, you're not going to want them on that one. It's as they're traveling over the top of it. So when they do that little touch down here, if the back of their calf grazes the string, I'm not going to want them on that. But obviously, this, definitely. Because that's a proprioception thing. Do they know where their foot's at? Do they know where the string's at? And can they have enough hip flexion to get it over parallel, or 90 degrees?
And every single step, reposition the feet. So they're going to go from together, toes at the base, to a little bit wider. They're just trying to get, they're trying to cheat. They don't understand they're doing that, but reset your feet. Reset your feet. Reset your feet. So every time, there's only a couple screens on this test that our feet are not like this. But learn this because this will help maintain consistency across the board with each one of you. So, you know, it doesn't matter who's screening. If you guys go here, we just standardized that test and we didn't get it here. Subtle, but it can make a big difference. So.
Next we have the lunge. So same tibia height measurement applies here on the lunge. So we have the numbers on the board. Just hop off real quick so we can show that real quick. We have the numbers on the board here. There's a line here, and that's where you're going to put your toe. So the rest of your foot will be back here, and then he's going to put his heel on 16.5. And that's going to be his distance every time he screens, unless he grows sometime in the next, before his next screen. So, toe on 0, heel on 16.5. And then we're going to have, the arm position is going to depend on the leg position. So his left leg's forward, so we're going to have his left arm go low, and his right arm go high. We want this hand in the lumbar gap, and we want this hand up here in the cervical gap. And then we want to make sure that the dowel is touching the sacrum, the upper back, and the head, and it stays there throughout the entire movement. So his feet are perfectly in line. And from here, we're just going to have him basically drop straight down, touch his knee behind his heel, and come straight up. All right, so what do we have for common faults that we see?
Dowel contact is maintained.
Yep. So we want to make sure that the stick stays on the butt, back, and head throughout the entire rep. If his head pops off the stick, he leans forward and the stick pops off his butt, anything like that, not a 3. What else?
The dowel remains vertical.
Dowel remains vertical. So we're looking in 2 different ways here. We're looking to see if this thing goes forward or if it goes side to side. So when I'm looking at him from this angle, I don't want to see it going this way. And when I'm looking at it from this angle, I don't want to see it going this way. I want that stick to do this. Just like that. Straight up the entire time. If it doesn't, not a 3. What else do we have?
No torso movement noted.
Or torso movement noted. So no bending, no rotating, nothing like that. We want the torso to be completely like a plank throughout the entire movement.
Dowel and feet remain in sagittal plane.
Go ahead and set up. We don't want any rotation. We don't want him stepping off. And there's one thing that we'll normally see a lot of times is this back foot rotating out. So we want to keep those feet in a perfect alignment. And if someone doesn't have the requisite mobility to get on this board and line up their feet, they're automatically a 1. So that's one thing that I didn't know right off the bat when I took my first FMS certification. And I was just like, all right, best thing you can score now is a 2 because you can't get in the right position. They're automatically a 1, just pull them off the board, don't waste your time. If they can't get square, they're never going to nail this and you know you need to have a mobility issue there most likely anyway. If they can't internally rotate their hip in to line up their leg straight.
Rotation, right?
It's got to be straight down that board. And you'll get a lot of people that they'll get on this board and their back toe will be about like here, and then you cue them to get straight, they start pulling it in, then they're off. 3 times, that's an attempt. Like I just fell off that board, that's an attempt.
Yeah.
So I just tried to get into the starting position, but as I tried, I lost the ability to maintain that proper starting position, and I fell off the board. That's 1 try. Don't sit here and fight this. Get on the board, because this one can be a major time killer, and especially if you're just sitting there, get on the board, and they can't get on the board, they probably don't need to be training lunging at that point. So,
What else we got? Scoring criteria.
So the knee touches board behind heel of front foot.
Okay, so in that same line that we lined up the feet, the knee should touch that line when he comes down. So it's an inline lunge, so we're looking to keep everything in line, and that knee should touch that same line and come up. And it needs to touch the board. If they can't come down and tap the board, then it's not a 3.
Any gap, and it's not a 3, right?
Yep.
You got to touch it.
Yep.
I mean, flush between the heel and the knee, or that's a.
Oh, yeah. There can be a gap between the
There can be
heel
a gap
and the knee.
between here. It's just we're looking to not break that plane, so I'm not coming down and I'm not doing this. I'm coming down and I'm staying in that sagittal plane behind.
Yep, and that's once again staying in the sagittal plane. What else we got for scoring criteria on the 3? So what about scoring criteria for the 2? There's more on this, right? Now that we've determined that he was not a 3, say that he didn't touch his knee down or whatever, we're gonna screen him for 2s, or we're looking for 2s and 3s on this at the same time. What's the scoring criteria for 2s? What do you have to do to be a 1? Yep. Fall off the kit. What else do you have to do to be a 1? Yeah.
Not being able to actually get up.
Can't complete the movement. Perfect.
Yep.
So if he gets down and or if they just get on there and go, oh my God, okay, do this. I mean, you can have potentially an 80-year-old client come in. I'm gonna screen him. I'm gonna take them through a deep squat, everything I can. But if I put them on that board, they're just like, I can see the fear. I'm like, you know what? Let's go past this and do, go to active straight leg raise, rotary stability, and all that kind of stuff, and make sure they're cleared on that stuff first. Because once again, if they're 90, they might not necessarily need to lunge and do split squats. Potentially. If their weight capacity exceeds breaking the board, then I would say that not necessarily. I have no idea, and I probably shouldn't have said that out loud. I don't know.
It holds
that's a good
at
question.
least a 350-pound person. I've screened 350 on a board, so.
We don't.
I always tell people as well, don't do anything you're not comfortable doing. A lot of the times, usually if you got somebody that big, a lot of the times they're not even going to be able to get in the starting position. They're going to be locked up through the hips, that toe is going to spin out, and they're going to be the ones that don't fight with that, okay, try it again, and if they're just sitting here, because they may be fine here, but we start to split the hips, now they start to lose, mobility restrictions, stability, whatever the case may be, they just can't get there. Most people that big they don't even get to the point that we can get to, that actual screen. They just can't get on the board. Yep.
And if it's going to cause them pain, it's going to cause them pain, then don't do it. So if they just went through a knee replacement, or they have some sort of patella issue or whatever, or torn something, don't do it. You know what I'm saying? And to kind of expand on that, if someone's in pain just standing, this isn't where you go with them. So the functional movement screen is not a medical tool. It's a training tool. So if someone's in pain, you would send them to a clinician who would do an SFMA, a selective functional movement assessment, and then send them back to you to tell you what patterns you can train and what patterns you should red light. So if they're in pain just thinking about it, it's a 0, and then you refer out for that movement. Cool. So yeah, if they fall off the kit or they can't complete the pattern, they're a 1. If they complete the pattern sloppy, but they get it, they're a 2. And if it's perfect and they meet all those scoring criteria, they're a 3. Cool. Any more questions about the inline lunge? And we'll have time to go over all this again.
And while we're going through this, I'm just going to break these down into pods as well. May as well. This is our general movement. These are all lots of joints, lots of stuff going on. Deep squat, hurdle step, inline lunge. These are what we classify our big 3. Now we're going through the rest of the screen. This is what we classify the small 4. These are where, if I had dysfunction in these 3, it's usually going to show up in these next 4 that we're getting into. So this inline lunge, if I'm really locked up through my shoulders, that's why we go lumbar, cervical, because if my shoulders are locked up, I'm going to want to get here rather than in here. So all these, there's a redundancy with the screen, so you can start to see shoulder mobility tied in to the inline lunge. These next four are what we call the small four, so it's we're getting into the next two screens we're going to do is a mobility pod. So these are going to primarily assess, upper, lower body mobility. And then the last two we're going to get into are what we call the stability pod. So we're checking soft core function, hard core function with those two. So these are going to be the shoulder and the straight leg raise are going to be our mobility pod. So Steve's going to take me through the shoulder screen right now.
Okay, so first thing you do on the shoulder mobility screen is you're going to check the length of their hand. So once again, we want to make sure we keep everything standardized. So there are two lines. If everybody looks down at your wrist, you'll see that there's two lines there, and the first line is right where your hand actually becomes your wrist, and that's the line you want to measure from. So everyone has two lines, and the line that's closest to your hand is your measuring point. So you'll measure from that line to the tip of your middle finger. So let's get the stick, hit that line. I actually have him put the finger on the spot. That's 7 on the dot. So 7s are our criteria for his shoulder mobility. So we'll have him stand on the ground, feet together. Go ahead and spin around to the camera there. We'll have his feet together. He's going to put his thumbs inside his fists. Once again, we're just standardizing. And in one motion, I'm going to have Jared reach out and put his hands as close together as he can without creeping them down his back. So he's just going to reach back, one overhead, one below, and just set them down. No wiggling. If they wiggle, you hit them with a stick. So from here, I'm going to take a measurement. And I'm just measuring from the closest part here to the closest part here. And if his thumb was sticking out, that might screw that up. So that's why we have thumbs inside the hands, standardization. Boom, boom. He is 10.5. So, making me do math. If he would be, to be a 3, it would be 7 or less. Right? To be a 2, it would be 7, and then you take 7 and you divide that by 2, so half of 7, and add that back to 7. 10.5. So he's, what were you, 10.5?
10.5.
So he was right on that 10.5.
And if I'm at 10.5,
I'm going to want him.
that's a 1. Now I got to be beyond that 10.5 point. So if I'm at but now I get
2 more attempts, and sometimes that might be the difference there. So go for it. Really trying, really struggling. 10.25. Oh yeah. I like to give Jared 1s. It's 9. So he has the ability to go from a 1 to a 2 within his training. We know his shoulder mobility stuff's going to work. His shoulder mobility could be this. Now he just went from a 1 to a 2. We checked both sides. 9.5. So this one's really easy for the scoring criteria because it's math. Same thing. Sure. Same thing. So on that side, he's sticking. On the other side, he's moving. So, but what is he? 2-2. And I might put a little note on the sheet. You know what I'm saying?
Make sure you warm this guy's shoulders up.
Yeah. And that right there, that improvement, you'll see that improvement cleared in your general warm-up. You will most likely see that movement cleared in the warm-up 90% of the time-ish. So, good. And so if anything else, he would be a 1. From there, we're going to do a pain clearance test, which could potentially override his score. So if he cleared that and it's good, we're going to take him here. We're going to put his palm on his shoulder, and he's going to start with his elbow down. And then we're going to just basically have him lift his elbow up. 9 out of 10 times, they're going to lift their hand up off their shoulder too. So if you want to, you can either tell them, don't lift your palm up off your shoulder, or you can just hold it down, lift it up. Client, did that hurt? Okay. Yes or no? And I say that now. Yes or no question. Did that hurt? If they start going, yeah, well, yes, that means it hurt. Anything besides, no, that did not hurt, it hurt. So if that hurts, then we're going to zero their shoulder mobility screen. And we're going to refer them out to someone who can clear that up pretty quick. Cool. Any questions on shoulder mobility or pain clearance?
What if they've had like a previous shoulder injury, so they say, you know, well, it doesn't hurt any more than normal. I've had shoulder problems in the past.
So, like that right there, I still say yes, more than normal. They're already saying it hurts.
Yeah.
So do I refer back out again and say they've had something?
If you've already had a conversation with their clinician about that prior to that, and you know that that's not going anywhere, sure, you know, like we train people in pain all the time. And you're not supposed to train people in pain, but once we sent them to the clinician, and the clinician says, I know what's wrong, and it's all good, and you can work with them, and here's some stuff to do with that, and here's some stuff not to do, go for it. As long as the clinician gives you the okay, and that clinician you trust and feel that that's a good assessment, then that's great. If they're SFMA, you're talking a better language. If not, it's not the end of the world. Just say, hey, this client has a shoulder issue. I screened it out. They had pain. Is this ever going to get better? You know, is there a chance that we can fix this? And worst case scenario, you throw in shoulder mobility correctives in their warm-up, which isn't going to hurt. And you might have to have them do shoulder mobility correctives before their workouts for the rest of their lives, and that's okay. They just know we found their weakest link. They might be solid on everything else. We need to do some shoulder mobility prep before we work out. And that's what you found with the screen. And that's the whole thing. Because if you never didn't know that client, never met their clinician or anything, now's the time that you know, okay, there's an underlying shoulder thing we didn't know about. And if you knew about it ahead of time, that's great.
Will you rescreen individual tests like every couple weeks to check
Yep.
on your corrective record?
Yeah, so I have a client who is, you know, 2s and everything, but sometimes he's a 1 on the shoulders and sometimes he's a 2, just kind of depends on the day. I'll screen him out on shoulder mobility every time he comes in. It takes like 3 seconds. I'll be like, let me see your shoulders. No. You know, we'll go through the shoulder mobility correctives. If it pulled him from a 1 to a 2, we're going to smash shoulder mobility, or we're going to smash weights on pressing and pushing and pulling and all the stuff that you use your shoulders for. If on that particular day it doesn't clear and it stays a 1, we're either going to keep working correctives until it becomes a 2, or we're just going to be like, no pressing overhead today. We're just going to make sure we hit deadlifts and horizontal presses and pulls and things like that.
Yeah, if you find a dysfunctional pattern and you got time, like you said, it takes 5 seconds to get a screen on shoulder mobility. Same way with like straight leg raise. You may as well find out if what you're doing is actually working, you know, the corrective strategy you start applying. A lot of the times you know, especially like straight leg raise, see where they're at coming in, be like, that needs work. Then I'll take them through my corrective strategy, and then quickly while they're still on the ground, try it again. And then I'm just looking, did what I just give them make any change? And if, you know, we're going 2-3 weeks, they're doing the same thing and we're not getting there, okay, time to reassess and, you know, reevaluate our corrective strategy, because apparently the recipe we're trying to follow here with that unique person is not working. So there's going to be other tools in the toolbox to find out. So these ones that you can do real quick, by all means, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. I mean, I've screened a straight leg raise or a shoulder mobility at 4 or 5 times in a session, you know, just to make sure what I'm doing is giving me a desired result that I'm looking for. If it's making that progress, awesome, let's continue down that path. But if it hits that brick wall, hits that brick wall, hits that brick wall, we're getting nowhere. Okay, let's go ahead, start to devise a strategy that's going to, you know, start to eliminate what we're seeing.
Bring it, you know, and what he was kind of saying, if that is the situation to where you're like, why aren't my correctives moving this score? Call in a friend. I don't know how many times I've been like, Jared, dude, seriously. I've been working with this dude for 2 months. His extra straight leg raise won't clear, you know, and get another set of eyes on it. And, oh, how about this? Boom, you know, and vice versa. So, or have you tried this exercise? Or is he doing this? Or did you go through breathing progressions or whatever it may be? You know what I'm saying? So that's just a good point to kind of add in right there. Extra straight leg raise. This is the foundational exercise here. So this is the first in the hierarchy that you'll start to correct. Let's go ahead and just kind of turn the board to where your profile view. Okay, so they're going to lay on the ground, back of the knees on the board, parallel or perpendicular to the board. So, and toes pulled up towards the face. plantar flex. So the back of the knees are actually touching the board, and he's pushing the backs of the knees into the board. So his legs are nice and straight. We want his feet train tracks, so parallel. I cannot get perpendicular and parallel today. So parallel to each other the whole entire time. If a foot spins out during the movement, that's where you stop the movement, and we'll go a little bit more into that. So I'm going to have him lift his right leg when he does this. So first, before I have him lift his leg, let's find the zones for 1, 2, 3. And once again, this is a lot easier. There's no judgment call in this one. There's no assessment. This is just, is it in here, here, or here? So, well, first go ahead and lift your leg. Keeping train tracks the whole time, maxed out, no bent knee, we're good here. We take the dowel, we line it up with the malleolus, and drop it straight down. From where it touches the ground, that's our measurement point. And we can take 3 separate reps there if we want to. Go again. Okay. Straighten that leg out. Go nice and slow. Slow, 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 slow. Right there. So I see a little knee bend right there. So I want to, let's go ahead and go again. Right. Boom. I like that. So that's where I measure. Now, what's that mean? We're going to find the ASIS and the knee and find the middle. I am lucky enough to have long hands that go together. You might have to go boop, boop. And then we find mid-thigh. So we're just looking for mid-thigh. You can eye mid-thigh if you want to, or you can be specific like that. So we have mid-thigh to knee, and then we have below the knee. So there's 3 zones here. This zone, so imagine there's a yellow line here that goes there. Then imagine there's a red zone from his knee to here. And imagine there's like a blue zone up here. All right? So if he falls in this zone, his leg could only go that high. He's a 1. Past the knee, but not past mid-thigh. 2. Past mid-thigh. 3. So, once again, ASIS, knee, find mid-thigh. Anything above that, 3. Anything in this world, 2. Anything back here, sorry dude, 1. Right? So we take 3 attempts, legs straight, nice parallel feet, align the malleolus with the ground, and go from there. Any questions on performing or scoring the active straight leg raise? Is there anything you want to add to that? All right. Let's move into the trunk stability push-up. All the guys love this one. All the girls go, ah! Except the CrossFitters. Okay. So what we're going to do here is there's different versions depending on if you're male or female. So guys will start by lining their hands up with their temple. Ladies will start with aligning their hands up with their chin. So, Jared's a guy, so we're going to start him hands up at the temple. He's going to raise his elbows up. He's going to make his legs straight. Once again, his feet are together. They're not spaced out, so we're standardized. All we want him to do from here is push. Straight up, come on down. Try not to test for 3 of these if you don't have to. And make sure you tell your clients too, at least I always do, hey, we're not doing push-ups like this ever again. We're only doing this for screening. I don't want you doing push-ups with your hands up by your face. We're just trying to kind of spread that out so we can put your core on more of a test there. So basically, if he comes straight up with no lag in the spine, he's a 3. Yes.
How wide do the hands go?
You want to line up the inside here with the clavicle or the AC joint. So if he comes up in a straight line, boom, he's a 3. If there's lag in the spine, or it's, you know what I'm talking about. If it's not a perfect straight 2x4 push-up, it's not a 3. And then we have him lower his hand position down.
So I may have got something like, if you saw that, kick the hands down,
and up. And that same position here, position 2 for the men, is the first starting position for the women. So, now Jared's a girl. We're going to start him with his thumbs at his chin. And here's his first push. He nailed it. He's a 3. If it was sloppy, we're going to have him lower his hands down to the clavicle and push from there. If he nails this, he's a 2. If there's still a lag in the spine or it's sloppy, he's a 1. So once again, sloppy in the last position, 1. Clean in that position, 2. Clean in the first position, 3. So does everybody understand that, how that breaks down?
Yep, the 3 and the 2 have to be straight up, straight down. There can't be any delay. If there's delay, it's a 1. Hurts.
And we're looking for that timing. So they should lock in and go up, not they start to move and then you see that lock. That's exactly what we're looking for. That timing was not there. So they started to move up and then boom. Not good. Boom and then up is what we're looking for. But really, the biggest thing you're looking for is just when you want to break it down as simple as possible, or you're teaching someone who's never seen this before, if they've never seen a push-up, stay tight like a 2x4, lift up. So no lag in the spine.